Hi, I'm Dr. Samantha Rush. I am the founder of Marvellous Women cards and also the host of this amazing, if I do say, podcast. In this episode, we're getting to talk to somebody who has a little bit of something special that means that she sees the world a little bit differently. Enjoy. Welcome to Marvellous Women, the podcast. On this episode, we are privileged to have Celia Craig with us. Welcome.
Thank you, Samantha.
Celia, who are you?
I'm an internationally acclaimed musician. I'm a speaker, I'm a coach, and I'm a neurodiversity advocate with a lifetime's lived experience of synesthesia.
Wow. Well, I think that there's a few places I'd like to go, but obviously the synesthesia is absolutely a fascinating topic for me. Tell us about your music, though.
So I've been a hyper-focusedly trained musician basically since the age of about 3. I started learning the violin when I was 4 on my 4th birthday. And at that point, I already had a lived experience of synesthesia. So in my music, it's been all classical. I've been trained very highly on the violin to start with, but then I pivoted to playing the oboe. So it's like a clarinet oboe thing, anyway, woodwind, and I became quite good at that. And in England, I was chairman of the BBC Symphony Orchestra at the Royal Albert Hall, and their solo cor anglais player came to Australia in 2007, where I was principal oboe of the Adelaide Symphony for 10 years. And now I'm on my own and run a record label. So I've tried to reclaim my music so that it's my art rather than what everybody tells me to play over and over again in very loud, noisy environments. That's the problem with orchestras.
So tell us a little bit more about that. You've reclaimed your art to make it yours, not everybody else's. What does that mean?
It's because when you're in an orchestra, it's incredibly thrilling to be in part, right inside this really loud, overwhelming sound. But if you have synesthesia, then you see half of it as well. You've got colors and patterns rushing around inside your head, and it's a sensory overload. So the other problem with orchestras as well is that you're likely to lose your hearing. It's quite possible. Lots and lots of people do, or get tinnitus, which is what happened to me. And at the same time, if you're doing that, playing music that other people choose over and over again, overwhelmingly by dead white men as well. That's what orchestras do, really. They're trying to change a bit now, but I was trying to influence programming. I was on committees. I was the chairman. I was on the artistic advisory committee or the section leaders committee, whatever it was. But basically, an orchestra decides what it wants to do and it tells you what to do, and your job is to do it the same every time, more or less the same. So now I'm trying to record music that means something more authentic to me. It's exactly what I want to say. Either I choose the repertoire or I basically make it up, because now I've got a group where we freely improvise. And it's the most thrilling feeling because I don't know what colors are going to come up for me. And it's just a marvelous thing to do.
Well, I think at this point, our listeners are going, tell me more about these colors. Tell me more about, what is this? How is this going on? So tell us more about that.
Well, it's such a fascinating subject, and people are quite secretive about synesthesia, actually. And that's usually because it's part of a lifetime of slight trauma, or when people sort of laugh at the idea that you have a connection with color and music. Actually, that's only one type of synesthesia. There's plenty of others. Some people can read letters and they come out in different colors or numbers. But for me, it's music and harmony. And so these patterns are kind of swirling around in my head, and they're consistent over a lifetime. So that's one of the things I've read about it scientifically, that it's a connection that's made in your brain, and it's unique to you. So if you ever do meet another synesthete and you're able to actually talk to them about their colors, what happens is we immediately get into an argument, because we go, no, G major is not red. But that's actually a joyous thing to do. It's fine.
Which is like a whole nother layer of perception, I suppose, because,
Yes.
you know, every one of us has our view of the world. And then when we get together with other people, it's like, no, that's not what happened. That's not the conversation.
Yes.
That's not what I said. And so it's not only that, but it's this extra layer of, no, that's not what color that is, because I see red, so it's red. It's such an interesting additional and potentially complicating, but also really enjoyable phenomenon.
Yes, and it's helped people. You said perception before. It's helped people get into some really incredible pieces of perception and understanding. For example, the Nobel Prize winner for physics, Richard Feynman, saw color in his equations, and he said that made him have an extra layer of understanding. There's a lady who I've read about called Stephanie Hodge, who is understands relationships or deals with data for the UN. Strategic advisor, she was called, and she said it gives me the splashes of color make me think, oh yes, certain things, and the arguments that people have, they're not really serious because we're just so happy to be able to discuss it.
Yeah,
and I did once have an incredible experience where the synesthesia helped me do something that's quite kind of superhuman, really. Because if you'd like me to tell the story,
please. You can't say I did this superhuman thing. Do you want to hear about it? Of course we want to hear about it.
Well, I didn't know what was going to happen at all. It was because I was in shock, but I'd left the orchestra. So Adelaide Symphony Orchestra, I was in it for 10 years. And then I'd left the orchestra and I was a member of the audience. So I was just sitting there watching my former colleagues on the stage, and there was a little delay in the concert. And I wasn't taking much notice. I mean, I wasn't watching my watch, but the guy sitting next to me, my friend Michael, started elbowing me like this. And he said, "Have you checked your phone?" And I was thinking he was worried because it was a live broadcast on the radio. And I was like, "No, of course I have. It's off." And he said, "I think you better turn it on." And he pointed to one of our mutual friends on the stage who was furiously doing this and pointing at me. And so I thought, that's weird. And I turned it on and there were 17 missed calls. And at that moment, the door opened at the back of the Adelaide Town Hall, and a lady ran in down the aisle, dragged me out of my seat in the audience, dragged me round the back of the stage, threw me into the back green room of the Adelaide Hall, gave me an instrument which belongs to my student and is a different fingering system from mine, and thrust me on the stage to play Elgar's Second Symphony. Live broadcast. And I had no say in it. And I was so completely in shock that what actually happened was I joined, the person was missing, and it was a radio broadcast and they couldn't do it without it. And I've played that piece a million times, but that wasn't even the job that I'd been doing in the orchestra, because I was principal oboe. Corongle is actually a different instrument that I used to play in London. So I've been given this thing and shocked and put onto stage wearing red. And what happened was I couldn't quite see the actual music, the notation, because the stand falls down and stuff, and it has to be organized before the player goes on stage, and this hadn't happened. So I'm sort of crouching on this tiny stool, looking at the music, the conductor's over there, and suddenly all my synesthesia just, as soon as the piece happened, the synesthesia just went into overdrive. And it was like that moment when Beth in The Queen's Gambit is playing chess on the ceiling, if you've ever seen that wonderful series that was on Netflix. So she's imagining things on the ceiling, and that's what was happening to me. The colors were like a runway, like Guitar Hero, on the ceiling in the town hall, which is a beautiful town hall ceilings, and it's full of ornate things. And suddenly I found myself watching it and not using the music. So I played the entire symphony, transposed it as well, because it's a different instrument and different key, from memory, more or less. And then I couldn't get rid of the synesthesia for 2 days after that. I was completely in shock. My brain was just, it couldn't process it, I think. So it reached for the synesthesia because it was the only way to sort of understand what was going on. And I played all right, actually, considering that I hadn't even warmed up or had a rehearsal or anything. But it was embarrassing because my shirt was red. Somebody gave me a black jacket.
Well, A, you kind of didn't have any warning. But B, it's like a whole, it's like that, I guess the only thing I have to liken it to, because I'm not blessed with the same skill set that you have, the same talent, is muscle memory. Is the same kind of thing. to be able to do that is just extraordinary.
It was quite funny, actually, afterwards. The only thing that wasn't funny was the fact that they paid me for doing that, but they only paid me half a call because I didn't do the rehearsal. So it was like the most pitiful amount of money for rescuing the orchestra on live broadcast for the ABC.
It shouldn't have been double because you actually didn't get to enjoy the performance. You actually had to perform in it.
Yes. I mean, the other thing is that because I'm late diagnosed as ADHD and autistic traits, you know, I find it quite difficult to stand up for myself. I always have done, even though I've taken some leadership roles. I feel justice very strongly, injustice as well, but it's very difficult to say. So in other conditions, like for example, if you're in hospital as a medical, you know, situation, it's quite hard to say, no, I want this. And I'm not trained to do that, because I have to say that basically women are not really encouraged to do that sort of thing. So it never occurred to me until afterwards, when they made me sign a document and then they paid me a very small amount of money. I thought that wasn't really fair, because you know, I rescued your performance. There would have been holes in it, but I didn't feel. I just coped with this. I'm quite good in a crisis, really. I just thought, what's going to happen? There'll be gaps. I know that part. But I was actually remembering performances that I'd done in London and remembering from that, and then were at least 20 years ago.
Wow. Wow. Do you find that that the synesthesia enhances your memory in other things other than music as well?
Yes, it's absolutely a gift in that way, because I understand from other synesthetes that it's quite common. It happens that people can have incredible memories when they're in that modality of, like, when the colours are happening. So I've now christened it, I say that it's when I'm in flow, and the flow state is something that's available to everybody, actually. And you know, you can have flow playing tennis or whatever you like. So when I'm in flow and I've got the colours, then sometimes I can take myself right back to a situation when I was like 5 years old or something, and I can remember it. It feels as if I'm still there. I sort of remember it in a kind of well, it's like a cinematic way.
Yeah. How fascinating. Yeah. I know that I've read some research on, you know, some other, you know, for those of us that don't have you know, this blessing, there are other ways that we can kind of tap into similar kinds of things for memory enhancement, like, you know, if you wear a specific perfume when you're studying, when you're in the exam, wear the same perfume, it will help you to remember. Or chewing gum, if you're doing a specific thing you're going to need to remember how to do later, to have chewing gum, then don't have it, and then have it whenever you need to perform. We are absolutely fascinating creatures, aren't we?
That's brilliant things that you've brought up, because both of those things really resonate with me in the sensory way. And I've actually used both perfume and chewing gum. I've got a really beautiful connection with perfume, if you'd like to hear that.
I'd love to. I'd love to.
So I'm currently South Australia's biennial artist, which means that they've given me the top grant that you can get in the arts world, and they fund my projects for 2 years. Create SA being the government of South Australia, and I'm extremely grateful to all the support I've had from them. They've been marvellous. And they sort of said, you know, here's this grant round open, and the question is, what would you do if you had 2 years of funding? And I kind of went, well, that's easy, because in the first year I would commission a lot of really interesting new music, and I'd play it in the second year. But during the time while the music's being written, I would start an improvisation group. And so I did. I started a group based on a duet that I'd been, as a couple, we'd been improvising in primary schools for Musica Viva in schools for 3 years, talking about synesthesia to primary schools children. And the two of us, 25-year-old autistic electric guitarist Casper Hawksley and I, wanted to develop that into a bigger group so that there'd be more harmony. So each invited a friend in, and it was gorgeous. And we put, they both have perfect pitch, which is another neurodiversity. And we put the concert into this beautiful greenhouse in the Adelaide Botanic Gardens, which is called the Bicentennial Conservatory. And it's like, it's round, like a, flying saucers kind of landed there. An amazing, the biggest glass greenhouse in the whole of the Southern Hemisphere, apparently. And then I thought about what I was doing, and I thought, okay, so we've got this beautiful plants, we've got this beautiful atmosphere, incredible acoustic. What I need to really enhance my synesthesia is the right perfume, because there are some natural perfumes that seem to go straight into the brain and they enhance your creativity. And there are others where somebody, if they wear a real aftershave, I can't sit next to them in concert. So I thought about the perfume that I used to get from the company that was called Cosmetics to Go that became Lush. So you know about the Lush cosmetics?
Yes.
And the perfume was called Ginger, and you couldn't get it in Australia. So I decided to write to Lush, and I said, I used to get this perfume called Ginger from Lush when I was in Bournemouth Symphony years ago, and now I want it again because I've got this synesthesia inspired massive grant. And I got this beautiful letter back from Lush saying, Mark Constantine, who runs Lush, remembers you. He remembers you being a customer from 25 years ago. He is also synesthetic. He uses his synesthesia to make the perfumes, and he'd like to gift you basically a lifetime supply of this perfume. And it got sent to me in a box. Isn't that marvelous? You couldn't even buy it in the local Lush shop. This guy, Mark Constantine, is synesthetic. He uses his synesthesia to help him design the perfumes for Lush. And he's incredibly good memory. He remembered everything about our conversation from 1995.
I think the other thing that really strikes me about that story, Celia, is that when you share, I suppose, what some people might keep hidden about themselves, the reasons why they wanted that perfume. If you just said, I used to use it and I really miss it, that's such a different story. But if someone who may be in your shoes, and, you know, you said before that people often keep it to themselves, that they have these, these extrasensory skills. But if you'd done that and you hadn't shared that, then where would you be? What would you have ended up with?
That's completely true. Yes, he connected by immediately recognizing that synesthesia story. And I realize now that that's absolutely beautiful. Now I'm collecting stories from other synesthetes, which I can share. I'm doing a webinar coming up, and I wanted to just do a free webinar and talk about the experience of synesthesia. And I had a few other friends who had told me privately. Now, I knew from this primary schools program that we did that little tiny kids would sometimes shyly self-identify. Yeah, I do that as well. And one of them we captured on film. It was so incredible when she suddenly put her hands up and said that she saw color, because the particular girl, her teacher had already told me, was in a locked-in syndrome. So she just said to me, she'd have a clarinet, but just don't bother talking, like don't put her on the spot because she won't like it. But then she volunteered. So I thought, well, I'll ask her. And when she came out and said, yes, I saw blue and green and they were pushing each other out and then there was gold, I just collapsed. I was in floods of tears because it was so personal that this girl had shared that it not only saw colors, but she saw the same colors as me. That's very unusual, because apparently it's like more unique than fingerprints. But I also have for my webinar 2 ladies in their 80s and 90s who'd never told anybody. And it's more women than men. That's also interesting. I've been looking.
It's more women than men that have it, or it's more women than men that don't tell?
It's more women than men that have it.
Yeah,
both, I should think. University of Melbourne data suggests it's just over 1 in 1,000 women, and just over 1 in 7,000 men that have experienced synesthesia. And lots of very famous musicians who you would know about, like Leonard Bernstein, who trained me. I didn't know he was synesthetic even when I spoke to him. But if you look sort of in the, not the data, but in the sort of, you know, small print of the articles, you say, oh yes, he had synesthesia. But there are always people, George Gershwin, even Marilyn Monroe had synesthesia. There are always people who've done something slightly extraordinary, and that's because you're visualizing something that nobody else has seen before.
How fascinating! Well, if any of our listeners also have synesthesia, would you like to hear from them?
Absolutely, I would love to hear from them. I'm going to create an online community where we can meet and connect and share our experiences privately, not a Facebook group, but it's in that way, because the kids always used to be a bit embarrassed, and the ladies in their 80s and 90s were telling me that they'd sort of, for example, told their mum when they were about 5, and then they didn't talk again for 60 years. So it can be something that people are a little bit embarrassed about. I mean, people at school used to laugh at me, and even when I was in the orchestra, I never told anybody in the ASO. I used to have meltdowns sometimes because the colours were not what I wanted. For some reason, you know, it didn't work. So people weren't playing in the right way, or the conductor didn't, and I didn't see the colour, and it feels so miserable. You just want to cry when you don't get it. And then when you do get it, you're like, wow, that's amazing. So I would absolutely love to connect with anybody who experiences synesthesia in any form.
Wow. It's just an incredible thing to have, and I can see how it would just enhance everything that you do. But at the same time, Celia, I imagine that it can be at times quite overwhelming to have not only what's going on in your mind and whatever it is you're trying to do, but this additional load. Is that right? Is it overwhelming sometimes?
That's absolutely right, and really perceptive of you, because somehow, because people don't talk about it much, then usually your employers don't know. They do know that they've picked somebody, or, you know, in the auditions, in these highly training sort of jobs. I mean, I can only speak about the music one, that the people who are getting those jobs are quite likely to have certain, you know, cognitive sensory enhancements, because they're so sensitive about their music and hyper focused. But you imagine if you then put it into a series of events where you've had to get to work through a lot of noisy environments, it's very hard to filter out noise. That's what I find the most difficult. So I'm saying noise, but it is noise if there's somebody drilling next door to what we're rehearsing, and you can see it, like there's this going on, and yet we're told to just ignore that and keep on rehearsing. And I find that, you know, sometimes people have often a lot of feelings with their synesthesia, so there's a real kind of emotional wrench with it as well. So it sounds, you know, it's difficult to get people to understand, you know, like that drill's just making me feel like I want to cry, and then you've just got to get on with your life. So yeah, sensory overload I've found so difficult, and that's where your perfume comment was so beautiful, because I remember I used to wear ginger perfume just a little bit, just a tiny bit, because some of my colleagues didn't like it very much, but you could sort of, it'd be a calming, a comforting thing.
Yeah.
Or chewing gum. Obviously you can't play with chewing gum, but that is also a way of breaking a sensory overload thing. Sometimes you use a strong mint thing to just bring you back into yourself.
Yeah, absolutely.
People have all sorts of coping strategies that they've worked out for themselves. But now I think our employers are starting to realize that they do actually have a duty of care to understand, and, you know, teachers, a duty of care to understand the children or the adults who are experiencing these things. And it's starting to be a proper conversation. I would love to help with that.
So Celia, I want to ask you a couple of other questions, just based on the story that I've heard so far. So obviously there's been a fair bit of changes in your life. So you talked about going from the violin, which you spent a long time learning, and then switching to the oboe, and you obviously play some other instruments as well, and then you've been part of this I don't know if I can kind of call it the machine of orchestras before, and now you're doing something different. They're pretty big changes. So kind of what's been the catalyst, or has there been a catalyst for these really big changes to go, yeah, I'm moving out of this, even though I've spent a long time here, I'm going to go over here now? Like, was there something that kind of made that happen?
Yes, that's a beautiful question too, because I didn't understand about my neurodiversity apart from synesthesia, which I could see, but I didn't understand the other aspects of it until recently. You know, at age 57 was a long time to suddenly discover that you've got ADHD, for example. So I'm aware that there's a kind of a slight pull to a new thing, excitement of that. But actually the catalyst, to be fair, has usually been domestic life. I mean, you know, you want to have harmony in your domestic life. So I was the chairman of the BBC Symphony Orchestra. I was at the peak of my career, but my in-laws in Australia were getting much older, and there was a dementia, Alzheimer's diagnosis, and my husband was getting really miserable about that, because he'd been away for 25 years, hadn't seen his father for that long. And at the same time, when we got married, because I'm English and he's Australian, I had promised that we might consider bringing up the kids in Australia because it's a great life. But that was precipitated by this dementia thing. So we did that.
Yeah.
Whereas now, my leaving the orchestra in Adelaide Symphony was actually precipitated by the same thing the other way around. My parents being elderly, and they're actually not in England, they're in France. They've decided to enjoy French culture and live in France because of Brexit, which was marvellous, except that they're now in their mid-80s. So there are caring responsibilities there for me, like as I saw Richard doing. So I tried to adapt things, think, what could I do? Well, I'm a coach because I've always coached musicians. It's part of your musical job. I'm a coach for the Australian Youth Orchestra. So I start to think to myself, well, what is coaching? And I should get qualified and discover what coaching really is. And that is something that I can do if I'm overseas in France. I can still connect with somebody online and coach them, or a group or whatever. So, you know, it's invention. I have to say that the original one you mentioned, the violin to oboe, that was not my decision. And I probably spent 40 years being miserable about it, because what happened was somebody decided that I had the talent to become an oboist, and there were too many violinists already. So it had been my whole life, my absolute artistic heart was playing the violin from the age of 4 till the age of 18. And all the synesthesia that I developed was connected to playing the violin. So although I liked playing the oboe, and I still do, it felt like a thing had been wrenched away from me, because you have, when you play the violin, you have all the vibrations right under your chin, and it kind of fills your whole body, and it's sensorily really amazing. So I really couldn't understand why I felt so bereft without the violin. I mean, it does mean that you don't have to do the 8 hours practice a day or 6 hours or something that violinists always do. That's so much. Oboists literally can't do that. But I was sad about it because it wasn't my decision. But I think I've eventually come to terms with it. It only took me about 40 years.
Yeah. And was there anything that helped you come to terms with it, or was it just the passage of time?
I suppose it's just really the passage of time. It's also me realizing that, you know, the oboe has been good to me. I enjoy playing it. It's a great thing, and it's the closest you get to singing, which my father did, and the violin isn't that. And I do have I have a great understanding of how other people play the violin now. So that's, you know, I've gained from it. I like watching people who are great string players and knowing how many hours practice they put into it and all that, because I did it at almost that level. I was at Prince Charles's Specialist Music School in London, and I had a scholarship. So all my colleagues went off to be famous musicians of various sorts, and they were all the people I used to play violin with. So it's really weird. But the oboe is a you know, it's a special instrument. It's counted as endangered in so many places because it's a bit expensive and it's a bit complicated. And luckily, I'm married to one of the world's top instrument repairers, because it's always broken or out of adjustment when you get a school instrument. It never works. So it has a terrible reputation. But when you're married to Richard, you're good.
You made a good choice there, I'm sure, on many levels.
I was lucky.
Now, Celia, I need to ask, if you looked up the words marvellous woman in the dictionary, whose face would you see and why?
Well, if it was a dictionary that I'd helped publish myself, I'd go straight to the page of Miriam Hyde, who is my total heroine. In my head, I've got a book that I've already published. I've got a film that I'm going to make about her. She's a 1930s neurodiverse virtuoso synesthete from Adelaide, who went to London and studied music, and then came back to Adelaide and was then Sydney, and in Australia was made synonymous with early music piano exams for children, which was not what she should have done at all. In London, she was a total virtuoso, and she dutifully did it for 37 years. She was marvellous, because when she finally retired from all that examining and everything, she started re-recording her own music, and she was doing things like playing piano concerti from memory at the age of 84.
Wow.
She's a total heroine, and I have a great insight into what she's really like, because I read every single one of her 166 letters home from London, which are in the National Archives in Canberra. And I was Creative Arts Fellow at the National Library, and reading this thing was like having a conversation with this marvellous woman that you feel like could have been your best friend. And in my case, I was like, I really get to know her.
I can definitely see in the story that you've just told that how that is similar to your own journey of kind of having to doing something that is okay, but you don't absolutely love. And then you finally get to the place where you break free of that and you can play your life your way.
Yes, that's marvelous. And also own your art. So play your own music.
Yeah.
She'd composed all this incredible music in the Royal College of Music, and her composition teachers were saying incredible things about her, which I know from her letters were fueled by synesthesia. She was like, I improvised this cadenza in Beethoven's Fourth Piano Concerto. And they came out of the door and they said, hey, Herbert Howells, who's a famous composer, come in here and listen to this. And they put it in the program. Composed by Miriam Hyde and Beethoven with Miriam Hyde, and they were saying things like, sounds like Beethoven, and she said, I don't know what they're talking about, it was easy, I just did it. And everything, she found herself on the front pages of the newspapers in London. They hired the London Symphony Orchestra to play with her. So I really recognize, and also what's lovely is I have a real connection with her because I know her daughter, and she's in her mid-70s and is also synesthetic. And she's been trying to get her mother's legacy properly understood. It was about her marvelous mind. So I felt as if I was slightly, she was brilliant. She was totally brilliant because she had perfect pictures as well as synesthesia, which was amazing. She had amazing hand at drawing, all these different modalities. She was drawing incredible, like English bridges and things. They're just perfect. They look like Leonardo da Vinci drawings. So this woman just had these incredible cognitive abilities, and it was great to hear them. According to her daughter, she had some operation, she was in hospital in her mid-80s, and the anaesthetist said she took a long time to go to sleep. And she said, well, I'm practicing and I haven't finished the prelude yet. So she was thinking about it.
Oh, that's hilarious. That's hilarious. I think the other thing that you said, Celia, that really resonated me is how she did these amazing, really special things, but to her, it didn't mean anything, or it wasn't really anything special. And I think that sometimes we forget, all of us, that we are all truly extraordinary and marvelous and do fantastic things. And that sometimes we just, it's okay to pat yourself on the back for things that actually it's not everyone could do this. It is something really special.
Well, there's a real danger also of perfectionism, isn't there? And
Yes.
I always, in music, as Miriam too, and in lots of other subjects, you often, you're encouraged towards perfectionism. It's not good enough. And your teacher, who's often male, says it's not good enough and you have to do it again. I was lucky I didn't have teachers like that, but I do it to myself. I try and, it's not good enough. It's not good enough. And then somebody told me when I first started my journey on my own. So the first thing I had to do was to raise $25,000 to record my first album. And so that was a philanthropy journey of much learning, a steep learning curve, definitely. But when I actually got there, one of my friends said to me, he said, look, that was a major achievement. You need to pat yourself on your back and enjoy that win before you move on to the next one. Because the perfectionism can get you on a treadmill of, well, I must get the next thing done and the next thing and done. And it's actually, it was great advice. It was right at the beginning. To enjoy your wins as well.
Yeah, that's something that I know I need to take on. So I will be taking that on from this conversation that we've had today, because I also don't do that very well. I'm one of those, all right, great, next kind of people. So thank you for that.
You're welcome.
For sharing that.
Enjoy your wins. Congratulations.
Celia, we are out of time, but I just want to say thank you so much for sharing your story and your insights with us in this episode. It has been phenomenal.
Thank you so much. I've really enjoyed it.
Celia, thank you so much for spending some time with us to share your story. It has been an absolutely fascinating episode, and I really love that idea more broadly of really reclaiming your art and the world around you and what it is that you do. so that you can make it your own, not anybody else's. And I really think that there's something in that for all of us. Until next time, stay marvelous.